Kate LaFalcha, welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. This is our Saturday book, and we are continuing our coverage of The Custodians by Dolores Cannon. This is video number 3. Video number 1 and 2, they are both from last weekend. So if you're new, welcome, and you can get the beginning of the book from last weekend in my video on my channel. So section 2, chapter 8, contact with a little gray being. So now, Dolores developed a 3-year client relationship with a woman named Janice. And because of Janice's ability to go into a somnambulant state, Cannon actually made contact with beings, excuse me, too much sage, who identified as ETs. So that's what we're talking about here. She makes the comment at the beginning of this chapter that as her years with these subjects go along, and it doesn't have to be in a linear progression with one subject, she would get more and more and more complex information as time went by, and it often came from different people. But they would build on each other's stories. They didn't know each other. This is different countries, different subjects over quite a lot of time, and yet the information kept developing and becoming more and more complex. So this woman, Janice, was a woman in her 40s who wanted to know more about troubling events that had been happening her whole life. Also, she wasn't able to have children, and she was concerned. She wanted to remain anonymous because she had a really high-powered, high-placed position in a computer company, and she didn't want anyone to know what was going on with her. She told Cannon that her earliest memory was when she was 4 years old, waking up screaming that they were coming to get her. She remembered seeing a face in her window often while she was playing, and she would try to run away from the room to get away from the face, but she'd be paralyzed and would suddenly find herself in the hallway, really, really cold, with her mother trying to shake her and get her to wake up. She also, this would happen when she was outside playing with her brother, and he would go call her mom. Mom, it's happening again. And she'd be gone. So she would say the face in the window was a guy with big eyes that changed into a dog. Her mother didn't believe her. The window was too high up off the ground. And she tried to explain to her mother what she had experienced, which the description was an out-of-body experience. She would wake up some mornings knowing she hadn't been in bed all night. She had several near-death illnesses as a child and recovered, and the doctors didn't know how she recovered because she shouldn't have. She had many episodes of missing time, and this was confirmed by others. Her mother would say, the only person I know who can go to the grocery store and come back 3 days later. This is as an adult. She would lie and tell her mother she'd been with a friend when she was a teenager. She was afraid of getting in trouble. She had no idea where she'd been. She'd come to finding herself being lowered down through the treetops. She'd be going into the store, and 1 minute, and the next minute she'd be coming down through the treetops. Her mother assumed that she was just a teenager out partying and thought her daughter was deceptive and unreliable. But she didn't do drugs, she didn't do alcohol, and she didn't go out partying secretly with her friends. As an adult, she often arrived late for things, and it was very frustrating because she'd start out in plenty of time, but she was inevitably late. It was kind of a joke amongst her friends and acquaintances. She'd feel like she was moving fast, and then she would feel like she would have to readjust back to a normal time progression. She didn't explain to anybody that this weird stuff was going on. As a child, she was afraid, and she often hid so they wouldn't come to get her. She left home at 18 to protect her family because she said there was this unknown thing that was haunting her, and she was afraid to tell anybody, but she didn't want her family involved with it. In 1987, she began to have flashes of understanding that were triggered by normal events in her life. She was explaining to a fellow worker about being in two different places at the same time, and that she was able to read two documents that were in two different places at the same time and give legitimate information, that she was getting this information telepathically, simultaneously to reading it. And eventually, I mean, this is hard to explain because it was hard for Cannon to explain, because it was hard for Janice, it was hard for this entity to put it into terms that human beings' brains could understand. But essentially what was happening, she was living parallel lives, and she was getting information across these parallel lines from teleportation and telepathic communication. And she actually saw in her mind her body dissolve like in Star Trek and end up in California. She felt like she was being given complex teaching. Nothing to prove this. This is just instinctively felt this way. 1987, one day she was getting ready to go to a potluck, and the next thing she knew, she was out of her body. And she realized this is what had been happening to her since she was a child. So she was beginning to remember more stuff and be more awake during these events, which is often what happens. She saw a familiar being, and she thought, oh my God, it's my guardian angel. And she asked this being, the being asked her, do you want to go back to your beginning? And to see all this stuff. She could see through walls and through her ceiling and look down on herself too, but she wasn't afraid. So here she is floating around with this being of light, looking through walls, looking through ceilings, and seeing herself. She wasn't in herself. She was looking down. She wasn't like looking at her body. She was looking down, and her body was down below her. She realized, she described herself going through the layers of her soul. She could see different time periods. She could look in different directions and see different time periods, all going on at the same time. She says, I am a light. I am pure light. I was a star. So this is her experience, her describing her experience of this. And she said, all right, this is my point in the universe. I've since learned why that happened. A star, or a particular portion of the heavens, is the entry point for the soul essence energy into the physical, and it comes through a particular sector of the sky. Okay. She could see colored lights and an angel, air and molecules. She was just seeing this difficult to describe amorphous display of lights and colors and light beings. She felt she returned to the source that was a rose quartz essence of love, and told her she had to go back. And she cried, and she said she didn't want to. She didn't want to be alone. She felt a whoosh, and the next thing she knew, she was in a spaceship, and she got freaked out. And she was told by these entities that they had been with her since she was a child. They were not going to hurt her. They were there to help her and to protect her. That she had agreed to this, that there are people who agree to help them. And they showed her actually a document that she had signed, which seems a little, I don't know, three-dimensional. But she had been sent with this special energy to help people. She found herself inside the spaceship in a round metallic room. It was very clinical, and she was on a table. She described the room, and it was, I won't belabor it, it was the typical dials and screens and control panels and stuff that she couldn't recognize embedded in the walls. She was told that she could get out of her agreement if she wanted to. They wouldn't hold her to it, but she had agreed to it. She was telepathically shown a scene on Earth. There were two lines of people, and they were choosing either an elevated consciousness or not. And it had to do with their individual vibration. The higher your vibration, the higher your consciousness is elevated. And it could very well have been metaphorical, not literally. And she was told this possibility. So now don't let anything that you hear in these books freak you out, because we're not talking about inevitabilities. We're talking about countless possibilities. And it's countless. They are countless because of free will and because of the innumerable points of decision along the way for all the people. It's so many variables, and much of it depends on our collective energy from our collective decisions massed together. So one possibility, and a lot of this stuff is cyclical and has happened before, is that the earth will go up in flames, and if it does, the people with higher consciousness will be taken by UFOs. She saw the earth explode and disappear and leave a hole in the sky and a new world roll in. And she says this is probably symbolic. Suddenly she found herself back in her apartment with 3 hours of lost time. She re-entered her body through her forehead. She had trouble readjusting to being in the physical. And she had to reintegrate to the lower vibration of the earth. She said it took about a week for her to feel okay. The next morning, she took her dog to a lake at sunrise and asked for some sort of a sign that she wasn't going crazy. And she found a locket in the grass, and the locket was a star. And locket had a star on the inside. And when she opened it and looked at it, it was pink, and by now it had turned silver. And she realized it was just like Cannon realized by the description of this locket that it was exactly like the ring that Cannon had gotten in the 1980s, if you remember that story. Her daughter had been given a ring by a stranger at some sort of conference, and she was told to give this to Dolores. And here it's the exact same symbol as this locket that Janice found. So this ring matched the star in Janice's locket perfectly. It was an extremely unusual design. And Cannon felt like it was sort of an omen of the inevitability of them, how important it was for them to work together. Janice told her of a day a month ago when she woke, this is gross, coughing up blood clots and saw no blood anywhere. And nevertheless, the bed and she were really, really wet, but it didn't look or smell or feel like blood. So she washed out her mouth and the bleeding stopped. Her dog acted like she had just come home from a really long absence when she got out of bed. It was very strange. She went to the doctor, and the doctor had no explanation. And they decided maybe this was interaction with ETs. So they did a trance, and she remembers that her dog was acting really strange. He saw something, and she hadn't seen anything yet. And she said that, by the way, that they had let her take her dog with her before. She's being told because of low energy and stress at work that she needed to go with them for energy work. So they went through the wall to get to her, and she says, I know them, but they're scary. There's two of them. They have no hair, big brown eyes, crepey skin. They tell her to go with them, and she doesn't want to. She says she wants to, she says to them, I want to keep my baby. Very random. And Cannon says, you were pregnant? And Janice says, yes. So her whole body goes out the wall, through the wall with these creatures. It's not an out-of-body event. This is a whole physical thing. And she tells Cannon it's done by displacement of molecules. She says it just feels like your air, your vibration goes faster than the vibration of the wall. She has her dog with her, and it's not scared at all. So she ends up on a table in the ship, and she's put to sleep. But Canon's able to access what happens from Janice's subconscious. Janice begins to respond in a really strange robotic voice and says it's not a sleep state, it's a level of consciousness to which you, Canon, are not accustomed. And it creates a situation where she will feel no pain. So she has a normal birth. She gives birth, but it's very, very early. Despite the fact that it's so early, this child is really developed much more than even a 9-month in utero baby would be, but it's tiny. And she realizes that it's a hybrid. So it develops way faster, and by 4 months, it's bigger than a 9-month baby normally would be. She was not always aware that she was pregnant, but for moments she'd have brief flashes and then forget. They made her pregnant, but it had nothing to do with hormones or the uterus. They did it with energy. This reminded me of the story of Mary and the visitation of the Holy Spirit, the Annunciation. The angel of the Lord appears unto Mary and she conceived of the Holy Ghost. Catholic school. The Magnificat, my soul does magnify the Lord. Oh my God, I did where I'm channeling. Anyway, this story is so similar to the story of how Mary conceived. And the whole story about Jesus was born to a virgin, and well, maybe this explains it. So they did it by energy, and they said a woman of any age would be capable of conceiving. Like, remember Sarah in the Bible? How do I know these stories? God, they really brainwashed me. Anyway, she got pregnant really, 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 really old, and nobody could believe it. Any age, didn't matter. What mattered was their character, their diet, and the purity of their energy, and a certain level of brain evolution. It depends on your spirituality level, because the baby gets extrasensory stimulation. This case here is not cloning, but cloning does sometimes happen, and Janice has done this before. It's a natural baby. In a natural birth, in a natural pregnancy that occurs like a human pregnancy, everything the mother is and everything the mother has been, the baby's exposed to while the mother's pregnant with the baby. In a cloned baby, everything it contains is everything the same as the mother, but it doesn't experience what the mother feels because it's developed outside the uterus. And they wouldn't tell her who the father was. So she told, the voice coming out of her told Canon, okay, now you've heard this story, but you're not allowed to make it public. You can't write it in your book yet. Janice has to stay anonymous. And this voice tells Canon, through your ring that we're with you always for the work you do. That ring is a reminder. You have a choice whether or not to work for positive or negative, and we're asking you to work for positive and not say anything yet. You've made your choice, and you will be protected because of that. She was told not she realized she wasn't really speaking to Janice. She was speaking to a gray, and she was told it was very similar to the picture on the cover of Communion. Janice could always say no, Canon was told, and there would be no repercussions. People report seeing these grays as cold, unemotional. But that's a human perspective. They have their emotions. Their nervous system doesn't show expressions of pain or suffering or emotions. And they don't realize how blank they appear. It's not intentional. They feel. They just don't express the same we do. They have no built-in emotions, but they are, they do understand. And they can simulate them too. They use touch and sensory stuff telepathically, and they're learning to integrate what they've learned telepathically to become a much more emotional kinds of beings. They can feel love and hate, but they don't necessarily understand the impulses behind them because they feel them in their mind and not in their body, not in their biochemistry. They began on a different path of evolution. They developed differently. And the emotional stuff, the physical emotional stuff wasn't necessary for their evolution. They travel telepathically, and their ships are powered telepathically. They're always in our atmosphere. They're faster than light. They're making babies to get their brain integrated with human physical body. They think humans are beautiful. Why, thank you. They're different. They're not dissatisfied with what they've created. They're trying to create a smarter race, a more evolved race, with the essence of Earth for the new Earth. The new race will populate a new Earth in case we destroy this Earth. They have surrogates in a sort of a hospital setting that care for these babies. And the mothers can visit if they want, and they can teach the babies teach the beings how to interact with the babies. They grow at an incredibly fast rate, 4 years in 2 minutes to mature. They live and are taught in a different place. These babies are being prepared for the new Earth. Some are clones, some already are on the Earth and may not stay long, but they've come to help. The women involved agree but don't remember. They're not creating human ET hybrids, so they're creating evolved humans. Some people are better able to remember and not freak. They remember what they can handle. You don't remember what you can't deal with. Some of this stuff scares humans, but they said, think about it. It's exactly what you do to animals. So depending on the project, gray ETs will work with other ETs. They're all not from the same place. They're working together. There's a confederation. Some humans work with them as experimenters. There are multi-level humans that can fill various roles in this big project. Let's see here. It depends on their degree of evolvement. It depends on their vibrational rate. It depends on the degree of molecular structure development and brain density. There are many elements that are taken into consideration. And we are most, to use your Earth term, loving in that regard, in what we do not wish to cause harm in anyone who has agreed to participate. At first, the people of your Earth who agree to participate do not understand or know why, and cannot know initially all the things they later learn as they continue to participate. Often, it can happen that they become unbalanced and they could eventually be committed to your insane asylums. They do not know how to integrate it into their daily life. Therefore, the imbalance takes place and they cannot find a point of equilibrium. We're sorry for this and we try to prevent it. Sometimes we have been fed misinformation by other human elements within your society for which we do have agreements. They supposedly supply us with individuals who have been examined to participate. We find we have a better success rate by approaching individuals on our own because there was game playing in the role between there was some misinformation given us by members of your society to which we agreed to participate, and therefore we found it necessary to work outside of the list provided. They were working with, governments, military, and they were deceived by being given people who were behavioral problems or mentally unbalanced or whatever. So they were deceived and they wouldn't tell Canon who was involved in all of this. It was a deliberate deception to control the project of the ETs. The humans were liars. They didn't know the ETs realized that they were deceived, and now the ETs are playing them. They asked Cannon to withhold information for a while, digest it, come back to them, and her contact with them will be facilitated, and they're all possibly light beings. Chapter 9, Taken Away from the Freeway. So Janice had this weird experience. It was lunchtime, and she suddenly, first time ever, decided, oh, I'm going to get lunch for everybody. So she went out in her car from work and saw a UFO in the sky. And she's driving slowly down a busy street, leaning out her window, yelling at pedestrians, yelling at other cars, look, look. Nobody, it's like she was invisible. Nobody reacted. And she couldn't hear any noise. And she thought, have I lost my hearing? What is going on? So she went back to her office, and as she walked in, her hearing came back in a rush. And people started noticing her again. But when she came in, everybody was mad at her because she was hours late with no takeout. So in a trance, she hears a hum in her head. She's sitting at her desk at work and feels compelled to go out and get lunch and realizes she was being motivated by them. This was very unusual in the middle of day at work. It usually happened at home. The next thing she knows in trance, she's moving into a different time period. She went into the car, actually in a dream state, and she felt nothing in this dimension. She felt funny, like she was going at the wrong speed, but it was okay. It was very confusing. It seemed like the wrong direction. She looked up and saw a UFO and knew that she'd just returned from the UFO. She rolled down her window and yelled and couldn't hear the traffic and couldn't attract anybody walking by, and went back to the office. So she was remembering a little bit out of order, but okay. Cannon takes her back to when she's with them in order for Cannon to reconnect with the ETs. Cannon begins to feel Cannon herself putting Janice under, starts to feel this weird heat and tingling in her crown chakra. Then, through Janice, a voice tells Cannon that she's scanning to be sure she was the right person. Yikes. So she's told that she'd be given some, but not all, of the information yet. She was told that Janice was driving and that then she and the car were not in our dimension. That's why nobody could hear her and she couldn't hear anything. She went into the ship and disappeared off the street, and it happened too quickly for people on the street to notice or remember. She needed some information to continue her work. She needed reassurance, and they knew that. She was temporarily invisible on her return in order to 100% assimilate all of her molecules in this dimension before she reappeared. Cannon was shown... this was also to show Janice that she could operate in more than one dimension at a time, that she's done at other times. She saw UFOs and the others didn't because they were in a different dimension, and she was in both dimensions at the same time. And this is done with thought, and they told her, well, you would say that time stops, but time has no meaning. The ETs were using thoughts and putting them into Janice's brain to speak through her, but the ETs can also talk directly, telepathically. Cannon tells the ETs that she prefers working through the voice of the subject and not being contacted directly. I thought that was kind of funny. It's like, this is a little too weird. So this is a different ET than the last time because Janice has progressed and is now working with a higher order of beings. Cannon is told that the true form of the ETs are pure energy and that can use thought to look like anything they need to look like. Despite being pure energy, they need the craft because the pollution in our environment affects their energy level, and it makes it harder for them to maintain the good energy. Energy can be affected by molecules that would touch it, and Janice was taken aboard to be given the good energy. Janice's energy actually surpasses this ET's that Cannon is talking to. She has progressed to a much higher level, and that's why it's a different ET and she's going on. And this ET is honored to work with her because of her elevated status. The ET says it's comical that Canon has to write out every word. They use a simple symbol for extremely complex ideas. And Canon's not quite clear on that. And they said, well, think of your Christmas and think of all the images that are involved with Christmas and all of the associations that one thing can evoke. And some ET contact is physical beings as they really are. Some are manifested forms of higher beings that just assume a visual look. Greys are really helpers to humans and terribly misunderstood. Canon is told that because their energy is so high, it requires them to do a physical change. The Greys do the mechanical work because they can cope with the lower vibration on Earth a little bit better. And many of the tall ET races are teachers, and most of them stay in the motherships. They're more elevated than the Greys. There are insect types that are just different. And Canon made some kind of a comment about how they scared people, and the ET kind of said, well, think about it. Ants are pretty afraid of people. So the ETs can look like cats or whatever. Those are called screen memories, and they confirm this to Canon. Certain information must come to Canon at specific times, but not yet, so she's told to hold her horses because she's asking all these questions. She asks about cattle mutilations, and Linda Moulton Howe has done all that research, and she's told that it's a mixed bag. Some of it is parts of genetic experiments, and some of it is done by negative humans who want to blame aliens. It's intentional. There are aliens on all different evolutionary levels, and they are also on their own path to raise their consciousness. Our government has negotiated with aliens for power. The aliens use the government's fear. Excuse me. The aliens use the government's fear of the aliens for the greater good of the universe. Because the goal is to stop humans and everything we're up to. She's told that Roswell was an accident. The government assumed that aliens wanted war. It was just an accident. I think lightning. And the aliens used the government fear of them to come up with kind of a truce situation. But the government broke the truce. The aliens are smarter than that, and they knew it. The aliens shared technology, and the government got greedy about it. The ETs were forced to be subversive when they realized the base dishonesty of man. Humans can't deal with honesty, and the ETs just wanted peace. There are people in the government who know and interact with ETs to get the technology. For example, the stealth bomber. It wasn't intended to be used as a bomb thing. Computer advances, our understanding of computers. The government betrayed the peaceful agreement. The government shared ET information for weapons and nuclear bombs and other stuff. And the ETs thought that our government wanted peace, but they were wrong. They underestimated the perfidy of humanity. And they were betrayed. And so now they're sharing in only a very limited way and kind of leading the government on. They said that they interacted with Nikola Tesla, not to be confused with that other horrible person who invented nothing, by the way. He used slave labor money from his South African father to get a start in business, his emerald mining father. And he invented nothing, and you know who I'm talking about. Anyway, Nikola Tesla could be trusted. Some humans are okay to trust. He said, well, I'll tell you, this is the ET. He's kind of got a sense of humor. He says to her, I will not teach President Bush how to use the speed of light to transport himself. They didn't trust the Bush administration. Janice knows how to, and she can do it. She can be trusted. And then the alien says, and I quote, Bush cannot be trusted. So they read minds. They know who can be trusted. They know who is a betrayer. And they're sad now about that. And they're very selective. Janice is not of the earth. She is a being of much higher elevated energy who has returned, unbeknownst to her, returned to help, and also who works in other worlds simultaneously. She's a very advanced spirit. She is advanced even beyond dimensions, very connected to soul existence. I would love to talk to somebody like that. The UFO investigators, like Cannon, are trusted and monitored, and the aliens kind of treat them like PR representatives. Abductees are light workers. They may not know it. They may be scared. Aliens don't mean for them to be scared, but, they're light workers who have agreed to do it. They're given an internal device, a seed, partly for the ETs to contact them quickly if necessary because of the power of the energy they sometimes interact with. And it sometimes also is used to activate their mental processes to reawakening and to help let the ETs ease their fears. So they have multiple reasons. The investigators, people like Cannon, are monitored and watched for their own protection. And she's going to continue on this topic later on. Chapter 10, the alien base inside the mountain. So this is a new session with Janice. In a trance, Janice says she's in a great place. Then a new voice comes out of her with greetings. It's the same ET as before, who describes how molecular speed is changed as abductees go and come, making it possible for them to go through solids. She's taken up to a ship, to another plane, or a different place on Earth. It kind of just depends on the circumstance. They use the flow of cosmic energy that's always present, and this energy needs balancing because you human beings, the Earth, are precariously perched on the edge of destruction, and this was in 1989. So we're getting help to maintain this balance because of our strategic location in the universe. Everybody in the whole universe is freaked out, and their atomic structure can be negatively affected by our behavior. There would be a danger of the universe basically folding in. In physics, it would be explained as a core expanding. If there was an explosion, we would experience it as a worldwide fire. But it would cause a ripple in the universe. The surface of the Earth is collapsing, and it's a symptom of the energies that are going on here. The ETs are working with individuals around the world to alleviate this. They rebalance the energy in the electromagnetic field of the Earth. Man only focuses when there's a cataclysm. And ETs won't stop what's going to happen because that would slow our consciousness, but they'll stop what might damage the rest of the universe. That's why they mitigate the harm. Our consciousness directly causes tectonic events, and it's collective, it's cumulative. It's not, if I had a better attitude, there'd be no volcano. No, it's collective. The ETs say the Earth shift seems unavoidable, and they're trying to buy us time. It's like we're driving down a dead-end street and refuse to turn around and come back. All ETs can do now is slow our speed to the brick wall at the dead end. There is a way to prevent it, but they don't think mankind is going to take that path. Two events are happening. The pole shift, which is inevitable, and an implosion of the Earth, which is avoidable, but probably won't be avoided. At the pole shift, the gravity is changed, and the ley lines of the Earth are reversed. In 1989, we were seeing the preliminary effects of the pole shift. The alien tells her it's going to get to the point where you will no longer be able to tell your winter from your summer. There'll be freak storms that could change the entire surface of the Earth. The ice poles, the ice caps will melt, flooding Europe, causing earthquakes, and in fact, to the point where the U.S. could actually become a part of Europe. You will have a new Columbus. Throw your maps away. Your technology will be lost. Civilization will be starting over. And the only way that man learns is by losing it all. So people will survive, but not everybody. I don't look very good in camouflage. I'm not, and I don't like, to camp. So, oh well. Rivers like the Mississippi will disappear. And suddenly that voice disappears and Janice's normal voice returns and describes a big room with a group of very old people in robes discussing something. And she sees a big screen that's a sped up movie of flooding. She's shown a mountain that has a base inside. She says, I know that mountain. I've seen it 1,000,000 times. She sees a whole city, a whole world inside the mountain. You go by small boats and channels and then to an elevator, and there are many different areas underground. The entrance is in the mountain for different training and classes, and she still goes there for that. Then her voice changes again, and it's a new entity, a female. Janice doesn't remember in real life, this female tells Canon, because it would interfere. And at some points in assimilation, she does remember some of it. It becomes a natural part of her as she assimilates all this information, and it kind of leaks out. The Earth is a junction in time that lets people move from time to time. So the Earth is I don't want to use the word portal, but it's a place where we can access time, past, present, and future, and not be missed. And it seems like 1 second on Earth, and she could be gone for actually 8 hours. We don't know anything about time junctures. This physics doesn't know anything. And it's possible to accidentally to go into one. Come out and go, oh, what was I doing? What happened? More evolved people will notice it more. So it's not unusual, they said, to go into a room and go, why did I come in here? And that's actually what's going on. The alien bases in the mountain is for them to help people. The government's not aware. The government knows about some bases that the ETs have with the government. They think that's it, but the ETs have their own bases the government knows nothing about. That's been there as long as the mountain has been there, she's told. There are other things that are here that the military and the government doesn't know about. It's a community that uses vibration to communicate with each other. It's not exactly telepathy. It's more like sound currents, the way dolphins and whales communicate. Man needs to know that the wind carries messages. Children talk to the wind. My mother used to talk to the wind. I'm not kidding. And she was perfectly balanced. Yeah. Native Americans know this. They were in tune much earlier with UFO and space technology. This mountain is the center of the universe in a rotational energy sense. The North Pole is not the center of gravity, or not the center of gravitational rotation. They won't tell her where the mountain is. It's a world within a world. She's told that Cannon was there in a former life. She has been through what most of her subjects are going through now, and that's why this information doesn't shock her and seems more digestible for her. And it's why she knows the information has been lost and needs to be refound. And this brought to mind something I had to write down. I just felt absolutely motivated to write this down while they're talking about this mountaintop and the mountain where you go when you learn and you become enlightened. What did Martin Luther King say? And I know it's technically from the Bible, but I have gone to the mountaintop. I thought that was really significant to the point where I had to write it down. So it's not in the book. If you read the book, you don't look for it. But anyway. So the government has found other bases and caused trouble, and they've had to move, so they won't find this one. Aliens have been at government underground bases, but it isn't always just an alien base. The government misused alien technology there. Some medical procedures and genetic sharing was going on. They said Christian Barnard, who invented the first heart transplant, that was given to him subconsciously by aliens. Humans improvised and messed up these genetic experiments, and the aliens needed to clean up the mess, and some lives were lost. We got the ability to do in vitro from aliens. And it's not that they handed them a blueprint, they did it telepathically. As people evolve, the differences they feel emotionally from disturbing events become easier to handle. The difficulties that we feel emotionally from disturbing events become easier to handle. You develop a sense of being able to face it, the inevitability of it, the inability of us to change some stuff. You come to terms on an energetic level. This entity describes to Canon itself as looking human, but more than human. Its physicality and energy have evolved. She's a doctor. When she's awake, Janice remembers her and draws her, and she looks kind of Egyptian. And then the question Canon asks is, wow, were the Egyptians drawing ETs? Is that what they were up to? So chapter 11, the energy doctor. This is this entity. So she does a new session with Janice 2 hours later, and Janice finds herself floating in space, going to a huge light with a strange feeling. And then a voice tells Canon that the light was a source of contact. Janice feels odd because she's shifting relative points in time and space, and it includes a moment of suspended animation. She tells Canon that she feels like 2 hours have gone by, but the being has done a week's work. The being is a doctor, but it's more of a holistic thing. She's a systems specialist, including the earth and communication sciences. She works with other beings that are assigned to specific humans from other galaxies, and their bodies adjust to where they are, like lungs and digestion and stuff. She says we can live among humans, and those capable of noticing that we're different might feel passing recognition, but these people may not realize that that they're interconnected interdimensionally. ETs differ from each other. They're not all exactly alike because they're from different places. The being tells Canon that her species reproduces 2 ways, but it's only allowed to discuss one way, and which is the way we do. The other way, she's not allowed to talk about. There was once life on Mars. Mars was like the Earth, but now went extinct because of cataclysmic events, atmospheric changes. 2 planets collided, and it affected Mars's atmosphere. And beings on the planet, like us, all burned up. Their society was much more advanced than ours. They had no wars, no murders. They were peaceful. They had a much higher consciousness. They had cities, and the destruction was not their fault. The face on Mars is real, but it's not necessarily a construction. It's a symbol to tell us that humanity had been there. Humanity similar to us. It was put there later after the cataclysmic event as a reminder. We could become the second Mars if we're not careful, Canon is told. Let's see here how we're doing for time. Okay. There's still life on Mars, but it's not what we would consider life. We wouldn't recognize it. It's not visible to us. There are colonies and civilizations and projects taking place, but they're not on the surface. Some Earth humans are there, some are survivors, and some are in colonies. The American space program needs to focus and get one thing right before it starts another. It's trying to do too much too soon. They're planning a base on the moon and a cooperative base on Mars, and Earth humans won't know about others being on Mars for a long time. We're not being clued in. There's a surprise. There's vegetation on the surface of Mars, but it's not the way we would define vegetation. We would think it was a rock. There are natural environments inside Mars with like untouched Martian nature. There's stuff going on under the surface inside Mars. And there are some atmospheric conditions and some humans inside Mars. Jupiter and Venus have had life, but she's not allowed to discuss that. Earth is a vital link in a chain of planets. It's strategic placed and will affect every other planet in the solar system. Only certain people can get implants from the aliens, and they have to agree to it. And then when they discover them, they freak out. Sometimes it's for monitoring. Sometimes it's to do continuous treatment to get the physical body able to cope with increased vibratory level or different atmospheric conditions so they can adjust to interdimensional travel and molecular reconstruction. A person may feel the effects as tiredness, digestive issues, a little bit like adjusting to a new diet. Implants often get people to change their diet just because they feel better. And implants are not bad. People don't realize, they don't raise their consciousness enough to realize that they've agreed to do it and that they always have an option to not participate. It's not a conscious choice. It's all subconscious and spiritual. They're followed all their lives. They're able to work with high levels of energy, and it is developmental. Those who are upset or angry are not ready. And unless they can transcend the emotional issues that this causes them, they'll be dropped from the project. But she's told discontent breeds progress. If you're too complacent, you're not going to change and improve. Some will begin to want to know what's going on, and that means they're ready to learn more about what's been going on. A person affected by our media and feeling angry and violated is living in the state of being only for their self, only thinking of their self. So I thought that was really interesting. Getting so wrapped up in what's going on in the media and politics. I notice I feel better when I don't obsess about a lot of stuff. I think I did a thing on, I did a thing on Tucker Carlson yesterday, and I have completely not followed him because I just had this gut feeling that I know what's going on here. This guy's a creep, and this whole situation is ridiculous, and it's meant to torture everybody and keep everybody distracted. But I wanted to research it in the context of talking about being aware of propaganda and how to avoid being propagandized. And I was kind of appalled about what I read. But it's a good thing to strike a balance between being informed and obsessing. That's the point that Cannon was given. So types of implants, some go in your nose, and these are monitoring what the people see, and they're close to the brain, and they communicate with the brain. Some go in your rectum. I don't want to know about that. Some go behind the ear. Some go in the base of the head, in the scalp, and they monitor the person, and it's some sort of a neurological project. Some go into a joint, and they'll put them between bones so they don't show on x-rays. They're put in relationship to pressure points in the medians of the body, like acupuncture. Implants are used for different things in different people. Cannon is told that she has no implants, but the energy at the base of her brain is being tweaked in order for her to work with these beings comfortably. The being says that she will scan her, and that's why she'll feel a sudden heat at the top of her head. And the being tells her she has elevated brain activity. So I think this is the end of this video. It's the end of video 3. And good, we got in just under an hour. Excellent. And I hope you're enjoying it. And I'll be back here in a minute with the last video, video 4. And we'll be done with the Custodians. So, slán go fóill.